I couldn't shake the unease as I gazed out the car window, driving through the quiet, shadowy roads of rural Pennsylvania at dusk. Everything around me was steeped in silence and gloom, as if the darkness itself was swallowing all light. Bare trees and dry, abandoned fields stretched endlessly on both sides of the road, unchanged from the last time I left this place. Each step on the gravel road leading to my Aunt Marley's house stirred up memories of my childhood, but it wasn't the innocence I remembered. Now there was only apprehension. As soon as I arrived, I noticed my car had been damaged right in Aunt Marley's driveway. The irritation of a broken car seemed trivial compared to the unsettling realization that my cousin Tyler was responsible. He couldn't give a reasonable explanation for his actions, only staring back with distant eyes as though he were someone else entirely. Standing there in the cold moonlight, a nameless fear crept into my heart, a sense that something far more ominous lay beneath the surface. Aunt Marley had always been a mysterious woman with an intense love for nature. Her house, nestled deep in a sprawling property, was surrounded by ancient trees and tangled vines. Every corner of the house was filled with strange sculptures and paintings she'd created, depictions of forest spirits, fairy-like beings that weren't the beautiful fairies of storybooks. They were peculiar and otherworldly, with skeletal wings and eerie expressions. Growing up, I'd heard countless stories from Aunt Marley about these forest spirits, beings she claimed had been here long before this town ever existed. I used to think of them as bedtime tales, but seeing her gaze now, the seriousness in her voice made me question my own disbelief. She looked deeply fearful, as though her stories were more than mere tales. "The trees here, they can talk, you know," Aunt Marley murmured, her voice barely a whisper as she looked out the window. "They speak to each other, to the spirits around them. Anyone who disturbs their peace will pay the price." I forced a half smile, part amusement and part unease, but her eyes held such an intense expression that I found myself unable to dismiss her words. That night, I was jolted awake by strange noises coming from the garage. At first, I tried to ignore them, but the sounds, metallic clanking and scraping, were too loud to be normal. An eerie weight pressed on my chest, and I got out of bed, grabbed a flashlight, and ventured into the darkness. Each step down the creaky staircase echoed through the empty house, amplifying the dread building inside me. When I opened the garage door, I froze at the sight before me. Tyler was sitting on the cold cement floor, surrounded by the shattered remains of the lawnmower. The beam of my flashlight cast his face in a ghastly glow, revealing fresh scratches and an expression of pure terror. "Tyler, what are you doing here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, but he didn't respond, only muttered incoherent phrases, his voice shaking as though haunted by something beyond my understanding. "They won't leave me alone. They want me to pay." He whispered, eyes squeezed shut. A chill settled over me, and I felt a sudden, irrational fear that this was only the beginning of something far darker. The following morning, I decided to have a serious talk with Tyler to understand what was going on. He looked exhausted, with bloodshot eyes and an almost hollow expression. He recounted a haunting story about how he had accidentally destroyed a fairy village that Aunt Marley had carefully set up in the garden. Ever since that night, he hadn't been able to sleep. Strange, nightmarish beings haunted his dreams. Fairies with skeletal wings and ghostly white faces, their sharp teeth glinting in the darkness. I tried to reassure Tyler, but a growing unease stirred within me. Something about this place felt wrong, heavy with a presence I couldn't explain. Aunt Marley's stories, which I'd once dismissed as folklore, came rushing back with vivid, terrifying clarity. Could it be possible that these forest spirits truly existed, and that they were angry? One rainy night, when the entire house was steeped in darkness, I awoke to find someone standing by my bed. In the dim glow, I realized it was Tyler, drenched from head to toe in rainwater, his face ashen and eyes wide with terror. He clutched my hand, trembling and whispering, "Alex, they're not the kind fairies we thought. They're like demons." A chilling whisper sounded outside the window, low and cold, as though calling from another realm. I stood frozen, feeling a malevolent presence lurking just beyond the shadows. I led Tyler back to his room, trying to calm him, but deep inside I feared it was too late. The following morning, I found Tyler in the garage, surrounded by a pool of blood. He had hurt himself severely, and the look in his eyes seemed to convey a final, desperate message. Aunt Marley arrived and saw the scene, standing there with silent tears streaming down her face. Her whispered prayers filled the room, as though trying to atone for our sins against the beings we had disturbed. It was a scene of painful tragedy, dark and heavy, as though we were condemned for breaking an ancient unspoken pact with the spirits. Since that morning, I can't seem to escape the feeling that something was left unfinished, a door left open somewhere between our world and theirs. Aunt Marley's paintings haunt me now, their eyes following me from every corner of her empty house. I once thought they were mere figures, odd creatures she dreamed up, but now it's as if they're watching, waiting. I keep running through everything she told me, every story, every warning, trying to make sense of what happened to Tyler, what happened to us. Was it our fault? Did we disturb something that should have been left alone? The silence feels heavy, a lingering presence that fills the air with questions I may never answer. One sleepless night, I began researching folklore, trying to find more information about these spirits Aunt Marley spoke of. I learned that stories of forest spirits weren't unique to Pennsylvania. Similar legends existed in many cultures around the world. These beings, it seemed, had always guarded their territory and punished those who dared to violate their sanctity. Each page, each line I read felt like another step down a dark, winding path. Perhaps these myths, dismissed as superstition, contained something real and frightening. Before leaving, I spent a final evening with Aunt Marley. She looked worn and tired, her eyes filled with sorrow as she gazed out at the shadowy fields. "I'm not leaving," she said softly. "Someone has to stay and make amends, to watch over them and keep the spirits from harming anyone else." Her words sent a shiver down my spine. I didn't fully understand her reasoning, but I knew she felt a deep responsibility, as though accepting our fate. As I returned to the city, an unshakable feeling of dread clung to me. My memories of the house, Aunt Marley, and the dark fields remained vivid and haunting. These old legends were not just tales. They were warnings of the respect we must give to nature and the unseen forces within it. Whatever had happened, I knew I would never take these mysteries lightly again. Confronting the unknown demands a level of respect we sometimes fail to understand. This experience taught me a painful truth, that sometimes the past is better left undisturbed, lying in the shadows where it belongs.